This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everybody, to this week's edition of Doc and Jock. I am the Doc, John McEnroe, joining me to recap the Lions' 2022 season. 9-8, a great win on Sunday Night Football, even though it came with a high level of disappointment for me. We'll talk about it. We'll get everybody's reaction, thoughts about how the Lions rebounded from a 1-6 start disaster to turning it around, winning 8 of 10 games. You just witnessed Detroit 8-2 in a 10-game stretch. I thought it was amazing, spectacular what the Lions were able to accomplish, and we'll break it all down. Brad Holmes spoke to the media on Tuesday. We got to give our reactions because there were some interesting nuggets of information regarding Jared Goff and the future of the rebuild, free agency, to break it all down. So the airwaves are open. We're going to break it all down. My guy, Adam, the Jock Strozinski, is here. Cuz, how did you take in the Sunday night game? First and foremost for me, I want to say this. I felt a deep level of disappointment when that game started. It was deep. It was like I was into completely the Rams game. And it was so disheartening that the officials in the Rams game really fucked things up. That roughing the kicker penalty was egregious. So I was deeply into that game. And when the Seahawks missed that kick, I was cheering. I was excited. I wanted the Lions in the postseason. It might have caused a scheduling nightmare for me personally, but I wanted to see this football team in the dance. It was a great game to watch, back and forth, even though it wasn't high scoring or anything like that. But it was just, you wanted the Rams to win. So I had not cheered for another team that heavily, probably in the history of me watching football. Wanted the Rams to win. It didn't happen. And when the final ticker went after the Diggs interception, the Seahawks won. It was like gloomy. I had a hard time rebounding even throughout the Lions game. Wasn't excited at all. It was like, I felt the disappointment of the Lions season, knowing that there was going to be no chance of the playoffs. Was I a little too into it, or did you feel the same way? It was just real hard to get off the mat. It just felt like a super kick once the Seahawks claimed potentially their spot in the postseason.
No, man, I was kind of sucked into it too. And it was one of those things where as the game started, because I watched the entire Rams and Seahawks game, as that game started, I was just kind of like, all right, cool. It was on. I was paying attention. It was more background noise. By the time you got halfway through the third quarter, you're like, they kind of have a shot here. They can do this. And then I got more and more sucked in. By the time the fourth quarter rolled around, I was on the edge of my seat. And I was cheering for the Rams. I was pissed when the refs – look, there were 4 different calls at the end of this game that should have went the Rams' way and went totally against the Rams. You talked about the Diggs interception. That should have been a taunting call. That should have went back to the Rams. They should have got They should have had a chance to at least kick a game-winning field goal. It never came. I was so disappointed and so deflated at the end of that game because I was so heavily invested in it. Like I said, as that game continued on, I got more and more into it that when it was all said and done, after the field goal went through and Seattle won, I was like, well, this sucks. And I kind of didn't want to watch the Detroit game, but I did watch the Detroit game. And it was weird because I had a very similar reaction to the Detroit game. As that game went on, I was upset the first quarter. But as we got into the second quarter, got through halftime, I usually shut the Sunday night game off at halftime. I got to go to bed because I got to get up extra early. I get up at 4 a.m. So I normally shut it off at halftime. I was like, no, I'm going to stick around through the third quarter. And I'm like sitting on the edge of my seat, actually the edge of my bed, watching this game. And then we get into the fourth quarter, and Alyssa's passed out next to me. I'm laying in the bed with 2 dogs. I'm cheering. The dogs are up. We're all jumping around. all the way up into the very end when they completed that fourth down. and I was like, eat it, Aaron Rodgers. I didn't realize how much hatred and how much vitriol I really had towards Aaron Rodgers until this game. I was so excited, and it seems so small-minded, right? Because it's not like you went to the playoffs, but you got to stick it to Green Bay. And I think anytime you get to stick it to Green Bay, it's a really good day. And I was pumped. So to answer your question, I started watching this game in a pit of despair and being very upset on my couch. I ended the game in my bed, very excited, pumped up, had trouble going to sleep. Monday was very difficult at work because I was very, very tired. I was geared up, man. Sunday was just a swing of emotions, and it wasn't like it was like a swing of emotions where you're upset for 15 minutes and then you're pumped for 15 minutes. It was like you were on the edge of your seat, nail biting, and then you were in a pit of despair for probably an hour and a half, almost 2 hours, to then just being almost manic on the other end of it. It was absolutely crazy. Sunday worked out really, really well. I think it could have been better if they would have played those games at the same exact time. But when it was all said and done, it was absolutely awesome to watch the Detroit Lions stick it to Aaron Rodgers, stick it to the Green Bay Packers. And I think the big thing in this game, there were multiple times where the old Lions, the same old Lions, if you will, a different regime of Detroit Lions would have folded up shop. Whether it was an interception getting taken away, whether it was a touchdown getting taken away, whether it was something, there would have been some kind of chaotic moment that would have just folded this team up and collapsed it. But this team, resilient, full of grit, basically taking on the embodiment of their chew-lipped, browned teeth from tobacco coach with a beet red nose, almost looking like he's been drinking all night long. This team takes on the identity of its head coach like I've never seen before, and I absolutely love it.
Yeah, it was nice. It was a nice victory. I love the disrespect card. First, I thought that the Lions were really playing up the Lions don't respect us, Packers don't respect us, the national media doesn't respect us, this kind of stuff. But it was coming from their coach. It was used by the coaching staff to rile the team up, knowing that they were eliminated. So it was great. Mm-hmm. It was great. Really, in the end, I don't want to be petty, but it's nice to fuck up someone's season. It really does feel
petty,
good.
bro. Be petty.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to Aaron Rodgers, be petty.
Yes.
Screw that guy.
Yeah.
He's an ass.
Exactly. He had the passive-aggressive sports stuff and the way in which he talked about the Lions, Deshaun Elliott, Amani Oruwariye. A lot of the Lions were not down for the way in which the Packers treated the Lions. And they went out and punked them in their own house. Bro, there were probably a good 5,000 Lions fans screaming and yelling, and Aaron and Aiden Hutchinson doing the Lambeau leap at that place. That storied ground was great. I just felt like this tidal wave of emotion. It kind of felt like the kickoff of the Lions, to be honest, in this regime. It really did. It made things better to win the game. It didn't override the sadness because you really wanted to see this team. My mind always goes to the Minnesota game, the Panthers game, the must-win scenarios. The Lions didn't step up, but when you put it in context, okay, obviously the initial fan reaction is going to be disappointment. You're not in the playoffs. Your season's done. We don't get to see this version, this gritty, tough football team anymore. We don't get to see it. It's going to change. But what was most satisfying was the fact that this Lions team had their backs up against the wall and got a W. They faced adversity. Their coach said, this is our playoff game. They knew that there was bad news ahead. But Jared Goff said something on the radio that was very interesting. He said that once the team found out, it actually kind of maybe made it easier for them to go balls to the wall. They knew that there was not going to be that supreme pressure on them to have to win. So they played looser, faster. You do hook and ladder. So I thought that their mindset, knowing what was given to them by the coaches and what was surrounding it, for them to still get the win, very satisfying.
So this is my I guess, concern and maybe question. Maybe I'm looking too much into it because I heard that quote as well. And I thought as I was watching that game with some of the calls that Dan Campbell was making, I was like, is he just playing incredibly loose because there's nothing on the line here? Yeah. Because I know that they went into this initially with the thought of this being a playoff game. Right. But as this game started to unfold, and you already knew you were out of the playoffs, there were certain fourth down calls. And look, Dan Campbell pressed all the right buttons in this game. So who am I to second guess what he did when he did it? But I wonder if there was a playoff chance on the line and you have a chance to close this game out, do you just take the field goal and call it a day, take the easy 3 points and force Aaron Rodgers to basically go 75 yards and score a touchdown on you? Or do you actually go for it on fourth and a yard and pick it up? Like, does the play calling change, or is Dan Campbell so dead set and this is what we're doing no matter what? I raised that question as I was watching this game unfold, because I do feel like they did play a little bit looser, and some of the play calling by the coaching staff might have been different if there was a chance for an actual playoff berth on the line. Did you happen to have that thought as the game was unfolding, or did you maybe think about that? Because I don't know, there were times where it was like fourth and something, and I was just kind of like, I kind of feel like you should take the field goal here, but let's ride, let's go. Because I was like, what do you got nothing to lose here, so let's just go all in here, you know? I don't know. Did you feel that way at all as this game was kind of unfolding?
Yeah, it felt like, they played a lot looser. They let it go balls to the wall. But listen, the Lions were going to play a good game. They had so much motivation. They wanted to show that this season, the motivation that they brought to the table was so high. They wanted to win. They wanted to win in Lambeau. The respect factor, those things for a young team play huge. And Dan Campbell and the coaching staff was able to bring that out of that team. And that's good to see that, hey, Dan Campbell said, I put the pressure on them. I wanted there to be pressure, win or lose, or whether the Seahawks won the game or lost the game, I wanted to ramp up the pressure and see how they responded, and they did. But to your point, also at the same time, the Packers are such a poorly managed team. It is shocking that that's the level of play that you put out there in your home stadium with the playoffs on the line. Dumb penalties, making mistakes, fumbling the football. Aaron Jones, are you kidding me? That was the performance that you put out there with that on the line. It should have been a rout. You should have been running all over the Lions. You should have been doing a bunch of different things. But in the end, their warts came out, and the Lions did a bunch of good things. And you got a chance to learn a lot about the Detroit Lions this year. It's a young core, and what I like most about this team is they can face adversity and come back, because 1-6, that usually is a death knell for most NFL teams. They can go such into a deep spiral that you could wind up ending like the Bears or ending up like the Texans, 3-4 wins and call it a day, like the Raiders. But for the Lions to finally, and Dan Campbell, to his credit, facing the heat from being 1-6, he came out and said, we're close. We feel it. We sense something's coming. And it was hard for us on the outside to say, how is that possible when it looks like you guys are just a close team, that's what you're good at. But finally, they got healthy. They got some level of a running game that got consistent. They found ways to win late. They were gritty. That offensive line showed out. They stayed healthy for the remainder of the second half of the year. And you learned that this team is gritty and that the core is special. That's what you learned, that you can, I believe, now start to raise the level of expectation for this football team, and there's a good chance they'll deliver. Look at the 6 players right off the top that you can name right off the top of your head that are going to potentially be all-pros, Pro Bowlers. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Penei Sewell, you got Jamison Williams, you got Aiden Hutchinson, Malcolm Rodriguez, James Houston, and that's just 6 right off the top. Now you're not getting deeper into the weeds of the role players that are spectacular with Isaiah Buggs and John Kaminsky, Aleem McNeil on the defensive line. Now you're going to add 2 more first-round picks. You have players on this roster that make up a core of young talent that are going to be special. And I learned a lot this year about the Lions, and the future's bright. I don't think I felt this optimistic even following Jim Caldwell years, because you just had such glaring holes that you didn't think were going to get plugged. You just thought more of the same. But there is potential now that this Lions team, and you look at that schedule, look at the home and away opponents, guys. You could potentially win out at home, only forcing you to win 3 games on the road. That road schedule is a bitch. It's hard. but you legitimately can swing the table at home. And this team, cause if you check out All Lions, I have my way too early season record. It has double digits in it, and you will like it. You will legitimately, at first glance, right now, today, in the second week of January, you could see double-digit wins for the Lions. I learned a lot about this team, because what did you learn about this Lions team? What was your overall summation of what you saw from this great group of young talent that really showed that they don't quit?
I think you have a GM who understands how to win football at this level and in this league. Yes. And that is something that we've been yearning for. We've been dying for. I think you finally have one who really gets it. And if you took an espresso on Tuesday, he doesn't say a whole lot, but I think there were some things that you can kind of farm out of what he said. And it does sound like this team believes in building through the draft. And this team is looking for a very specific type of player. And I think those players take on the identity of this head coach. It's going to be knock down, drag you out, tough football. It's going to be a team that is willing to go and scrap and fight tooth and nail. You go back to Dan Campbell's initial press conference. I think everything he said in that press conference, you are seeing with this team, minus the eating the kneecaps. But this is a team that will fight you tooth and nail, and it will do whatever it takes to get to that point to basically beat you into submission. And I love it. I think it's fantastic. I think with this team, you've also learned that you've got guys coming, right? You have a really good young core. You look at that defensive line, right? Aiden Hutchinson and James Houston on that defensive core. Those guys can get to the quarterback almost at will. And that's fantastic. When have we ever been able to say that about the Detroit Lions having two edges basically in the same draft class, being able to get to the quarterback? That's fantastic. I think you have a diamond in the rough with Malcolm Rodriguez. Again, another young player. Kirby Joseph. Do you remember when Kirby Joseph was drafted and I said, what the hell are they doing? Because I didn't want Kirby Joseph. There was another defensive back that I wanted. And I was like, why are they going after Kirby Joseph? You're like, he's long, he's rangy. He does a good job at high pointing the ball. I believe that was your exact text message to me. And I was like, there's this other guy there that they could get and plug in, and he should be better. I was wrong on Kirby Joseph. Kirby Joseph stepped in when you lost essentially a leader in that back half of that defense, and that guy played out of his mind, and the defense actually went forward. It didn't take a step backward. It went like 3 steps forward and got better with him out on the field. So you've got young guys on the defensive side of the ball. Yeah, it wasn't very good. Yeah, it was ugly at times. Yeah, they're ranked 32nd in the league. Yeah, the stats are horrible. But what you've seen down the stretch was a team that bought in, gets it, and really plays their ass off on the field. And I think if you're a Lions fan, you can be excited because the hope is you go out and you get at least 2 more guys who can come in and start and play at a level similar to what Aiden Hutchinson did, similar to what Malcolm Rodriguez did, similar to what Kirby Joseph did. And then you maybe go out and grab a free agent who can slot in and help give you some more production to kind of offset and really help bring up the floor on this defense and what it can be. And then offensively, we've talked about the offensive line forever and a day. The offensive line on this team is the strength. This offensive line is so good. I do think there are pieces that you still have to kind of add. I think you need to go out and you need to get a guard, and possibly a guard who can play center or a guard who can play tackle, somebody with a little bit of flexibility. But the offensive line is so damn good. Jared Goff obviously trusts this offensive line, willing to stand in the pocket, willing to make those throws. And on top of all that, he's got receivers that he has a connection with. Jared Goff's kind of a weird cat. And this is what I've kind of learned as the season has progressed with him. He's a dude who will really only throw you the ball if he trusts you, if he's confident in your ability to make a reception, if he believes in you. That is the only way he's going or looking at you to get you the ball. So his receivers, his running backs, they have to have a rapport with him. If you don't have that rapport with him, he's not getting you the ball. He doesn't give a damn how fast you are. He doesn't give a damn how good you are. Look at Jameson Williams. Jameson Williams an absolute freak show. The touchdown that was called back was absolutely disgusting. So sick, so fast. Once the guy got the ball, he hit the afterburners and he smoked everybody, right? How many times did Jared Goff really go to Jameson Williams this year? If you look at his target share, I think it's probably like 14 over the course of the last 4 or 5 games. Not a whole lot. And yeah, it's the way they utilized him. But if you compare that to you compare those 4 or 5 games and you compare it to a guy like Khalif Raymond, and I think we all agree, J-Mo is a better wide receiver than Khalif Raymond. Khalif Raymond obviously out-target shared him, outperformed him, and it's because Jared Goff has a trust with him. He has a rapport with him. So I think J-Mo's relationship with Goff gets better. I think this offense takes the next step forward. Obviously, there are some pieces that you're going to have to add to this offense to keep it humming and keep it purring at this level. And really, truly, this is going to be selfish, but the big hope is you don't lose a guy like Ben Johnson. You don't lose Ben Johnson because I do believe the reason for all the production this year is because of Ben Johnson. You had tight ends that you didn't even know what their names were or even how to spell them. And after you traded Hawkinson, these were guys who were making plays. And these guys scored a lot of touchdowns down the stretch. And it's because of the way that they were schemed to get open and obviously putting those guys in position to score. And that all falls at your offensive coordinator. So I think there's a lot here. I think you have for the first time in a long time, you have a really good team that maybe isn't as balanced as we would like it, but I think we're trending in the right direction, and I think we're tracking that way. Think about it this way. You were essentially a half a game out of making the playoffs this year. And if your defense was a little bit better, we could be talking about playoffs. If your head coach, who I think your head coach believed in what they were doing, but I don't necessarily know if your head coach necessarily believed in this team early on. I think as the season stretched, Dan Campbell believed that he had a team that was capable of winning games. Instead of going in and coaching games to try to prevent them from losing, he started coaching them to win football games. And I think that is where some of those silly mistakes that he made, where we're like, what is he doing? Like, what the hell are you doing, Dan? Like, how are you costing this team games? Remember, this is a guy who cost this team 4 games this year by my estimation. Your estimation might be 2 or 3. Again, we're talking about the difference of a half a game. That's what you missed the playoffs by. If Dan Campbell didn't have brain farts early in the season, it'd be a little bit different. But you had a coach who you got to see really grow into his role and really became a almost cerebral head coach. And you can look at that penalty late in the fourth quarter where he declines it, essentially forcing Matt LaFleur to use another timeout. He wasn't giving them anything. He didn't care that they didn't get that initial first down. He didn't give a crap about that. He was like, we're going to get the first down anyways. I don't care. You're going to burn another timeout. Almost cerebral in playing some mind fuckery with the other team. You have a head coach now who has massive balls and is willing to go for it in just some of the most ridiculous spots, which I don't know is a good thing or a bad thing. But when it pays off, it is a magical thing. And I think he really grew into his role. And that's probably the biggest thing after all of this that I said for the last, 10, 15 minutes. The biggest thing I took out of the season is you have a head coach who has grown into his role. And you have a head coach that is the face of his team, and his team buys into him, and they represent him in his mentality on the field. And I think it's a fantastic thing. I think it's absolutely great.
Yeah, it's easy to buy into Dan Campbell, no doubt about it. With everything going on, he steadied the ship. The players took his personality. Since when do the Lions come out and shit talk and then back it up? They were shit talking and call like Deshaun Elliott right there and posted on the Lions team website. They don't respect us, and I don't like that shit. And they were able, and just I'll give Dan credit for this. The players were so much more relaxed. They were a manifestation of themselves. Yeah, there was always a little bit of some coach speak and some professional talk there, but in certain scenarios, in certain settings, just look at, prime example, look at how the Lions handled the post-game media and their introductions. You had Taylor Decker just be like, you had Malcolm Rodriguez come out and be like, I'm from Barry Sanders University. And you had this looseness that was totally different than you would have seen if somebody else was in charge. So
is it safe to say that the Detroit Lions are now America's team? Because
No.
I firmly believe it. No, dude, I believe it. The general public, not just Detroiters, are so bought in and so behind this team. I think the general public loves this team. And I think a lot has to do with what you got with HBO's Hard Knocks. I think a lot has to do with the team starting the season 1-6, being in a dire straits, and Dan Campbell basically fighting for his job, to then being a team that was on the verge of the playoffs. And you have guys on this team that have personality. People love personality. That's why people love me, because I have personality. I'm just joking. But you have personality on this team. You've got guys who are exuding it. I mean, when you have a running back who beats Barry Sanders, one of the all-time best running backs, when you have a running back who beats his record, show up in a Pokemon Gengar hat. I mean, what are we talking about here, man? You know what I'm saying? Like, you got some dudes on this team that people absolutely love.
Yes.
It's crazy.
And nice to talk to, that I would say in previous regimes. But for me, though, it's different. In 19 and 20, I think it teaches you something when you got to be a little scared to talk to somebody, because they were going to be like, no, A'Shawn Robinson, because I know you were in their same locker room with that dude. That dude, if you looked at him cross-eyed, might have come over and gave you a look like he was going to come off the top rope and clothesline you. So he was just always gruff with the media. And a lot of the players, one time I remember walking up to Danny Amendola. He was sitting down, and I had asked him, like, kind of just a simple question, like, I know Matt Patricia's getting a lot of heat. Can you defend him? And he looked at me like I was impeding on his life. Like I asked him for $1 million. And it was tough. There were a couple guys that were easy. Like Darius Slay didn't give a fuck. He just said whatever the hell he wanted, whenever and whatever.
Whatever.
Yeah, but a lot of the guys, it made it tough. But I think you need that to kind of build that confidence. This year, I just went around and was like, "Hey, you got a couple minutes?" Half the time it was yes, and open up. Sometimes a couple guys were obviously knew what kind of story I was looking for and wanted to get out, so they would just use the I gotta go to training, I gotta go to rehab kind of thing. So it was fair though. It was not dismissive. It was, I'm sorry, I can't do it. I gotta go rehab. I got something to do. Other guys were just like, no man, I'm done. And so, it was much easier to spend 45 minutes 3 times a week in that environment. Dude, half the time they were blasting rap music that we were trying to figure out what the hell was playing in the speakers. And it was a better environment. So that breeds what Dan Campbell said. He's like, look, just ask the players. This should be a place free agents that want to buy in, want to come and play in. And that's how you build this team. Is that my impression of Dan Campbell is he turned around the culture. The team buys in. They fight. They rebound from adversity. They can handle ups and downs of a long season. And now it's time. It's time for the expectation to rise. 10 wins or bust next year. You got to make the playoffs. You got to be right there in the mix to win the division. My expectation is to win the division and earn a playoff spot, and top end goal, hosting a playoff game at Ford Field. So, I don't have too many fears right now, because you're going to add talent, free agency with cap dollars, and you just know that Brad Holmes is going to make the moves properly. My biggest fear right now, as we sit, because you got to talk about it, can't be all rainbows and sunshine. My biggest fear would be that Jared Goff this is it. That I do believe they're going to try with Ben Johnson. My biggest fear, 2 fears actually, is if Ben Johnson leaves. If Ben Johnson leaves, I don't know that someone else can just come in and recreate the relationship, the dynamic that they did and got out of Jared Goff. I mean, the dude did not throw an interception for damn near half a season. Yep. And you can't replicate that. But my other fear is that this is it for Jared Goff. Like, this is the zenith. You need a little more. Just like he had a good year. He got better. And that's something you typically don't see at someone's age, that you see them continue to get better at 27, 28, 29. You start to see where they're at. But cuz you now are going to give Jared Goff supreme talent. Jamison Williams is not like Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's not like DJ Chark. You're talking about Jerry Rice type stuff. You're talking about CeeDee Lamb type stuff. Chase, the top end speed, the top end talent in the neighborhood of Tyreek Hill. You need now Jared Goff and that dude to connect to get to where he gets 100 catches and 10 touchdowns, and you need to have it next year. And you need to have big plays and possessions and not a lot of drops. You need to have Jameson Williams be involved. I'm just not yet confident that Jared Goff will be have that much confidence to launch it deep and to be able to take full advantage of what Jameson Williams can bring. I want to see it. So until I see it, you got to question it. But my biggest fear is because Ben Johnson, his name is starting to get his name out there, that he's a smart guy. And you look at some of the offensive numbers in terms of Jared Goff over 4,000 yards. You have all these points at home. It's a fun offense. The last game of the season, you have a dude calling hooks and ladders and looking like a proficient offense on the road at Lambeau. That opened up a lot of eyes. But I do want to caution everybody that's nervous. He's only been on the job now 1 year. That might preclude some teams from really taking a look at it, but I do think in the future, Ben Johnson is going to be a head coach, and it's going to be a good one. My biggest fear would be 1, Ben Johnson, 2, Jameson Williams and Goff.
My biggest fear is, look, you had a great season, right? Everything that you've done extremely well. And you look at what happened last season. Last season, at the end of the year, they finished up incredibly strong. They rolled into this year, and they started off putrid. They started off so bad. My fear is that this team, what they did down the stretch this year, doesn't translate over and doesn't carry over to next year. And there is a little bit of regression, and this team is still kind of searching for the pieces. And again, cost themselves a shot at the playoffs. That is my biggest fear. But wrapped up in that fear is Ben Johnson leaving. I think we all agree Ben Johnson is the secret sauce. He is the magic spoon that stirs this drink to make it work. He is the guy who has everybody talking about Jared Goff in this way, in this light, and has everybody believing that Jared Goff can do a whole lot of great things for this organization. So much so that you've got Brad Holmes in a presser basically talking about the future relies with Jared Goff. And I was telling you before we started recording and just kind of a little bit of pre-show that we were doing, I have a major fear there. I think that is one of the biggest things that can cripple this organization is Brad Holmes' complete and utter trust and faith in Jared Goff. Because I don't know if this is the real Jared Goff. I don't know if this version of Jared Goff is what he's going to be for the next 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. If you can actually build your future around him as your quarterback and basically bypass other guys who can, 1, prolong a window because they'll be on a rookie deal, and 2, possibly have a better skill set. I'm not sure if he has shown enough. And look, he played his ass off this year. He played incredibly well. So I get where some of that confidence from Brad Holmes comes from, but I'm not 100% sure I'm willing to basically tie my future and my organization to that because it's been so inconsistent. You look at what happened last year, and look, he was hurt last year. There were a lot of guys that were banged up last year, didn't necessarily have the pieces. We talked about wide receivers last season being a weakness on this team. You fast forward to this year, it looks like they've kind of got that wide receiver room figured out. Maybe add 1, maybe 2 more pieces, but it looks like they've got that wide receiver room figured out. Jared Goff has a decent run game. The offensive line, for the most part, was healthy and played well, and things clicked. Things worked. Also, Jared Goff and the offensive coordinator get along, and they have a similar vision, and they're willing to do things and communicate and work together. But all that being said, if Ben Johnson leaves, does Jared Goff regress? Because if I had to bet money on it, I would say he probably wouldn't be able to duplicate what he did this year. And he probably wouldn't be able to come close to duplicating what he did this year. And to me, that's a monster major fear of mine is the trust that Brad Holmes has in his quarterback. And look, he's been with him since day one. I get it. But that is a lot to tie to your QB. And I just don't think I would do it.
Well, how do you? Because look, they're not going to cut him. Jared Goff is going to be on the roster. They're not going to cut.
He's going to be your quarterback next year. He's going to be your quarterback the year after that.
Yes. So how do you, knowing that, we can give our opinions on that all day long, and I think it's pretty fixed now. Most people are in the camp of supporting Goff, wait and see, or they want a new mobile quarterback with a big, huge arm, maybe like a Will Levis or an Anthony Richardson or someone with a huge arm in free agency. But I'll say this, knowing that Goff is there, I think you said it. Bring in a guard, depth on the offensive line. I think it's imperative you sign and bring back Chark because the chemistry now has started. You got Chark, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Jamison Williams. That's the makings of a trio that Jared Goff will like. I believe that probably the final piece is making a tough decision on DeAndre Swift.
Yes.
Not that it's popular, but if you can get a third rounder for him, you avoid the dilemma of potentially, who should get more of the touches in the red zone, Swift or Jamal Williams. You bring back Jamal Williams, you know what you got in him, and you go younger and more reliable in the draft. Maybe you take the chance on the Texas running back in the first round. Maybe you take a chance on somebody else that you believe is out there. I don't know. Do you take a swing at Jacobs from the Raiders? Do you bring in someone who's established that's a little bit older? Swift is great. Here's the dilemma, cuz.
He's never healthy.
He's never healthy. That's the problem, is that you got 6 games of him that were healthy. Can you take another gamble on him? You still have him under control for one more year. You don't have to make this move. I think it's a kind of a safe move to do in regards to you need a bell cow running back that come hell or high water. I need 6 yards, it's 6 yards. Because you got to remember now, okay, while we spent half hour being rosy and being positive and raising the expectation, this team did lose 8 games. This team did get punked in the most must-win game of the season against the Panthers, where you needed to ball out. So in my mind, you continue to build around Jared Goff, there's a chance for playoff wins. And then when we get to that, bridge to talk about can he take the next level and actually win it all, he can be one of those players. But you got to get him a running back that you can rely on, that can stay healthy, can take a hit and get back up. I mean, I don't know about you, but there was a guy named Kenneth Walker that I think the whole country saw last year that maybe you could have just did without Pascal, and maybe you could have did with Mr. Kenneth Walker. I mean, he did do it against Michigan. Not 1, not 2. I don't think it was 3. I don't think it was 4. I believe the facts dictated that he scored 5 rushing touchdowns against Michigan in a primetime situation when everybody's eyes were on that team. And basically, you saw once he was gone, Michigan State went to irrelevancy. They went to the Eastern Michigan League and became irrelevant. So you could have had Kenneth Walker. That's the kind of guy you got to find in this year's draft.
How cool would it be to have the offensive and the defensive rookie of the year on the same team?
Oh, my God.
Does that ever happen?
See, could you imagine you have Kenneth Walker and Aiden Hutchinson? Ooh, let's not talk about misses just yet. It's a good year, 9-8. Let's not listen. I don't want to bring it up to Michigan fans. You did lose to TCU, and Kenneth Walker kind of did eliminate Aiden Hutchinson from the playoffs. Just saying, putting it out there. State guys kind of deliver in the biggest moments when they need to. Just saying. So, that's how we look to the future. You gotta hit. That's how I look at it. That's what kind of gives me confidence, is that at least when the GM is in your corner, he ain't going to he's like, I'm not going to let you fall, Jared. I got you, man. I got you. You're my guy. So he gave him all the toys he wants. I mean, what more Jared Goff hit the NFL jackpot where the guy that scouted you is running a team and loves you and doesn't care about what anybody says about your arm, your talent, this or that. He's like, I got you. You need a line? You got a line. You need a guy to get 17 touchdowns? I got that guy for you. You need a top-end receiver? I got that for you. Now you just need that final piece. That final piece is a running game, and you boost that defense. Now we can talk about Jared Goff getting to the Super Bowl again with the Lions.
Yeah, I mean, yes. Okay, let me put it like this. I think you can get there with Jared Goff, but Do you believe you can win with Jared Goff in the Super Bowl? I'm not sure if I'm willing to go out on that limb right yet. Again, my concern is him being able to duplicate what he did this year, because let's be honest, man, he played his absolute ass off this year. He looked incredible, especially down the stretch. This guy was definitely a QB number one in any fantasy league, in any real life league, in just life. He was a QB number one all day. And he made Brad Holmes look incredibly intelligent for going out and trading for him. I just am uncertain, and I'm unwilling to say he's a guy who will help get you to the promise and win that game, because one, he's never won that game, and two, when he did get to the promised land, he looked completely outmatched and he looked in over his head. And I'm just not sure he can duplicate what he's done so far. But all that being said, you're right. He's got tools. He's got tools all day long. He should be able to perform up to the level and up to the expectation that we have for him. So I think he's good. I think he's a great fit in culture-wise. That's the one thing that I think Dan Campbell is really working on this season, was really helping solidify the culture of this team. And I believe he did that. I think culture-wise, he is the perfect fit for this team right now. I think Jared Goff has at least the next 2 years for you to really see what he can do. And after that, I think there will have to be some really hard decisions made on what you're doing with him. Do you believe that there is a basically you've got a 2-year window with Goff to really figure out what he's capable of? Because I do think he is capable of being this quarterback that you got this season, but I also believe he is capable of being a very turnover-prone quarterback who has trouble finding the open wide receiver and getting the ball deep. So I do feel like it's a little bit of a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. Do you think that 2 years, in the next 2 years, we'll have a better understanding of what direction this team has to go with quarterback? And do you think that if they do pass on a quarterback early this season, it might come back to bite them in the butt?
I think that if they find a player that they like, that they want to develop, Brad Holmes did say in his media session that he is on board with the idea of, and he brought up Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers, of drafting a quarterback and letting him sit. So it's not out of the question. It's out of the question, number 6. It's not happening. Defense, linebacker, corner, interior defensive line, linebacker, any of those 2 of 3 combinations you're getting in the first round. Mm-hmm. I don't see it. I would be floored if he took a quarterback at number 6, because that would send a reverberating impact to Goff that your time is up. And I don't think they want that message. They do want to send them a message that you got to compete. And I know that they have to, whether it be a free agent. I don't think you roll with Sudfeld as the backup. You have to. I don't think so either. You got to have some competition there, just in case. Maybe you look to the Panthers quarterback. You look to Sam Darnold. You look to maybe Washington, and if they move on from their quarterback, you bring him in. I
do like Heineke. I think Heineke's a very good quarterback.
I like him. As a backup.
It's weird. Like Washington has tried to move away from him, but they keep ending up having to go back to him, because all he does is win.
Exactly.
There's nothing special about him, but the guy is
just a gamer,
and he wins games.
He's a gamer. He seems like a lion. So yes, it's a 2-year window. You got to build a defense. The time is now. 23 has to be playoffs and hopefully a win. 24 has to be all in. 24 is the year you're targeting. I think 24, 25 are the years you make the push. 23, 24, 25, are all about playoffs and winning. So 23 is about getting in, hopefully you win. 24 and 25 are making the push. So you get next year, you have to get in. You have to get that experience. And it sets up that way. I mean, how do you not capitalize on 4 top picks that you're going to have in the first 150 picks? You're going to have a lot of good picks. 2 in the top and 2 in the first round.
No, I think you've got 5 of the top 82.
Yeah.
Which is nuts. So you have to. The way I feel about it, you basically have to come out of this with 3 starters for your defense out of your top 5 picks, and you need to have at least 1 rotational player for your offense, whether it be a guard or whether it be a running back. You need to add a little bit to that offense, and you need to get at least 3 more guys who are going to be in there making a difference. I mean, you look at what they did this year, and this is what's amazing, is the job that Brad Holmes has done drafting. It's absolutely incredible. Because if I was to tell you, you're a GM, you're going to hit a home run with your first pick, you're going to hit a home run with your 6th round pick, you're going to hit a home run with your other 6th round pick, and you're going to hit a home run with your 3rd round pick, you'd be like, all right, cool, we'll take that all day long. And then you get a rotational player out of your 2nd round pick. You'd probably be a little disappointed in that, but I mean, you hit a home run with 4 guys starting, 4 starters, like impactful starters, guys who made monster plays throughout the year, and guys who made massive plays when it mattered the most, giving you a ton of snaps every single game. If I was to tell you you were to pull 4 starting players from one draft, you'd be like, let's go, let's roll. So Brad Holmes has done an amazing job drafting, and he's going to have to do it again. And again, you've got 5 guys, and I think it's the top 82. You need to get at least 3 defensive starters, and you need to get at least 1 guy who's going to rotate in and give you meaningful downs on offense. That's what you have to have. Their plan, and if you watch this press conference, their plan is building through the draft. They are looking to have a young, feisty, angry, willing to fight you core, and then what they're looking to do is go out and add in a free agent who can help and really help, like I said, raise the floor of this team. That's what they're looking to do. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out.
So now I have to get your sense. I think it's a huge question. It has a lot of layers to it, but it makes sense too. When you look at it, and I know now people are riding high off of the elation of winning on Sunday Night Football. In prime time, the whole country saw it. Record numbers, I think, for a finale in the last 6 years. Over 22 million people saw it. The eyes of the country were watching. You saw a team have fun. You saw a good team. You saw what the potential could be, the fun, you saw everything that makes the Detroit Lions what they've become this year. But on the flip side, this was a team that could have been in the playoffs. It was right there. And for me, while I'm happy and I definitely feel the optimism, a part of me is still feeling what you call missed opportunity. This team, this collection of talent could have made noise this year if Dan Campbell doesn't make those boneheaded decisions against Minnesota, which he said he will never forget. He'll be haunted by kicking that field goal at Minnesota. And I brought it up again. He used my name. He said, you want me to talk about it again? But, I think he misheard my question, because my question on Monday at his final session was, and you can hear it on YouTube, was knowing that you told us it ate you alive that you had this missed opportunity against Minnesota. The 1-6 start, the blown opportunity against the Panthers, how much will that be reflected upon knowing that this is going to be something that prevented you from getting the playoffs? He had a good line about, the standard has been set, but the expectations are now going to change. He said that the team needed to go through the 1-6 start to kind of get into that deep hole, to learn to scratch and claw their way out, and it actually forced them, once your owner comes out and has to talk at 1-5, it forced them to make tough decisions moving on from Aubrey Pleasant. It forced them, in essence, he said that facing the adversity was part of the reason why they went 8-2. And I get that. It's very positive spin at things, but I think he'll look at it as well and say, damn, we knew we had to win against the Panthers and we just couldn't execute stopping the run. We knew we had a couple games there. Another game that people are going to remember too is the Miami game. You were leading at halftime and you took a complete dump in the second half at home. Those 3 games are 3. You win one of them. One of them, cuz you're in the playoffs. And that's just the fine line. 2 is that the tie fucked the Lions in every way possible with Washington and the Giants. It fucked the Lions in every way possible, forcing this entire nonsense with needing the Rams to beat the Seahawks. So that's the fine line. Could you imagine another 9-8 season next year? It's just that fine line, because I'm talking 11-6. That's just 2 games. You mess up at home against Chicago, who's going to be having the number 1 pick, and they potentially could get Jalen Carter, forces a fumble late, impact, number 1 player. It's not going to be easy. We're talking, on the side of, hey, what could go wrong here? And you look at everything and you say, man, it was a blown opportunity. This season was a success in my mind, yes. But we can't discount that there's no wasted years. There's no guarantee. The roster is going to change 30 to 35%. Guys are going to be gone. Will Harris. It
always does.
Amani Arwariye, maybe even Jeff Okudah, DeAndre Swift. Some of the fat might get trimmed from this team. You don't know what the chemistry is going to be like. You don't know if Jameson Williams, we're hoping he's going to be a good guy. What if he starts pouting into next year? What if he gets so wide open and Jared Goff hits him in the knee? Is he going to be happy? When I ask him, hey, can your quarterback get you the ball? Are you upset? What's it going to take? So wasted opportunities, you can't just discount them that easily. I thought this team was good enough to make the playoffs, and some external factors and coaching and certain things. You could even make the argument, if you're going to activate Jameson Williams, his final stat line is going to be 1 catch. How the fuck did you let that happen? How do you let the star guy, okay, I didn't say 50 catches in 4 or 5 games. One catch? I could have went with 10, 12, maybe 2 touchdowns, maybe a couple more end arounds. You didn't have to make him the focal point of your offense, but you didn't have to make him like the guy that was a practice squad guy. So I'm looking at the other side of the coin here. Yes, it was a success, but man, I'm of the opinion I kick myself and I get mad knowing what could have been.
Yeah, I think the season was a success. And you look at it, I don't think anybody had this team winning 9 games. I think a lot of people were hopeful that would be the case, but deep down, I don't think anybody really believed this team was going to win 9 games. On top of it, it's not just winning the games, it's how you won the games. You look at those games that they won, they absolutely brutalized some of those teams. They went out there and Jared Goff put on a career-defining performance down the stretch of the season. You went into Green Bay and you popped them in the mouth. You made them eat their words, and you did it on a ballsy, gutsy trick play, and you did it on a 4th down. You could have went for the field goal, but instead you're like, nah, screw it, let's go. You showed the world what you're capable of. Yes, I think this season was a success because going into the year, I think we had them at like 6 or 7 wins. This team outperformed and outpaced what we thought. Were there missed opportunities? Absolutely. Did this head coach, who I believe has grown a ton from where he was at early in the season, from just the first half of the season, I think he has grown a ton. Did your head coach cost you games? Yes. Did your head coach cost you chances at making the playoffs? Absolutely. Do I think your head coach is better for it? I sure do. And I think this team is better for it. And I think his message has gotten across, and I think it resonates. This is the one thing that we really haven't, I think, drilled down enough on is the tone and the culture that Dan Campbell has brought with him, and the fact that this team is in lockstep with him. This team believes in this guy. And it's been forever and a day where we can talk about an entire team. I believe 110% that 100% of this team believes in this head coach, believes in this coaching staff, believes that they've got all the pieces and all the right guys to do what it takes to go out there and win games and get to the biggest game of them all and get into it and come away with a win. I believe this team believes that. Now, is that necessarily the case? No, I think they're a few pieces away. But I do believe that you've got a good coaching staff. I believe that you've got a good head coach who knows how to navigate really tough waters, right? Like when it's 1-6, you're on the precipice of losing your entire team. You are on the verge of utter collapse. And yet somehow Dan Campbell seems to perform the best when the deck is completely stacked against him and it's the complete shits. He's able to go on and basically rattle off 8 wins out of 10 and get this team looking impressive and getting a primetime game and showing the world what this team's capable of. So yeah, I do think it was a success. I do think this was a good season. I think this is the step that was needed on the progression chart. And look, when you're trying to put a team together and you're trying to game plan and put a team together, the path to success is not linear. It does not like start at point A, and it does not just go straight up to point B. It doesn't go like that. There are ebbs and flows. There are ups and downs. And I think what you've got is a head coach who does a fantastic job of navigating those really low points and making sure that the heat stays off the team and make sure that the team doesn't ever really waver in what they're trying to do. Make sure everybody is in lockstep, make sure everybody's moving forward. And I think that's fantastic. I think you figured out after year 2 what you have in Dan Campbell. And I think that is incredibly important, because we were throwing flags on Dan Campbell. We were questioning Dan Campbell. There were people who weren't believing in Dan Campbell. And I think as this season has wore on, Dan Campbell has turned a lot of people who were very skeptical of him into believers. And again, it is for reasons like that this was absolutely a successful season.
9 wins, 8 losses, man. It was fun. It was a fun 10 weeks. It flew by. Winning does cure all. Let me tell you, the vibe of 8-2 was amazing. Bills and Panthers. The Panthers fucked your season. Can you imagine? The Panthers. Bills and Panthers. That's it. In your last 10 games, those are the only 2 teams that took L's from the Detroit Lions. The future's bright. I think that now the attention is going to be on free agency. It's going to be on the draft. It's going to be on who's going to come back. All that stuff. Stay with Detroit Sports Podcast. Come hell or high water, we'll find a way to break it all down and give you uncensored, unfiltered, unbiased opinions regarding what we think is happening with the Detroit Lions. And it was a fun year, fun breaking it down on the podcast, fun going out there. And now we can have a season where the 2023 home schedule should produce a lot of wins. Not to shill for the team, but if you're looking at a light kind of schedule and you want to go see wins and have a good time, might be the year to jump on the bandwagon and buy some tickets, because you'll have a good time. Don't go travel on the road, though, in 2023, because it's going to be tough sledding against the Chargers, Ravens, Chiefs. Whew. I would have liked to have seen Matthew Stafford back at Ford Field, but it wasn't meant to be due to the victory. But it'll be a fun time in 2023. Dan Campbell and company have the future bright. And also, cuz what's great, too, is we're close to it. We've been watching our whole lives. Now the country is starting to go, wait a minute, that was the Hard Knocks team. That was the Jamal Williams. Wait, he made a great speech to start the year, and he made a legendary speech where he's crying for 10 seconds, and then he's like, wait a minute, I got to turn the flip. I can't be looking all soft and crying here. He's like, well, I'm an all dog up in here. And it was great, because that's who he is. He can be emotional on one side and then come out and start talking about the disrespect that he felt. I love how he said, I don't watch TV. But so then who told you that the Packers were going to be heavily favored? It was the head coach. It was the coaches. They were like, look at all this. Look at all this noise. Look at the 79% of NFL experts that picked the Packers. Go handle your business. And they did. And that's all you could ask for, is you dangle the motivational carrot. Do they respond? And that's why Dan Campbell said what he said when he walked up to the podium the first day on the job. And that's why they set out to get young, hungry players like Amon-Ra St. Brown, like Penei Sewell, who wants to rip on little linebackers. He don't give a shit if you're 5'11" and you're a skinny little fucking linebacker. He's going to push your ass over and like it and want to do it again. And you look at the grit and the toughness that has been established in the trenches. Aiden Hutchinson, the sacks that he delivered when we were all questioning him. James Houston emerging with 8 sacks. He said his goal was 10. So you look at what can happen in the future. The future's bright with the Lions, and we'll be here at the Detroit Sports Podcast to cover it all. Make sure you follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSCROZ. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. Make sure you hit us up. Let us know what you think. Respond. Get yourself over at Detroit Podcast. Anywhere that you find and listen to your favorite audio podcast, type in Detroit Sports Podcast, and our content will find you. Just that simple. Because that was a good one, a good recap. We'll break down other areas of other sports now, looking ahead too, but we'll still peek into the Lions on the next edition of Doc and Jock.